So, folks, it is a great opportunity to talk about a film that some of you may not have heard of. Peter 58 is coming in March, and I get to be able to talk to the director, get to talk to the star. It's going to be so cool to do that with you guys. Michael Hall, thank you so much for being here. Jet Jandreau, hopefully I didn't butcher her name. She is with us as well. Jandreau?
Yes, Jandreau, perfect.
Jandreau, all right, all right. Well, thank you so much for both of you for being here, that kind of thing. Before I get too far into things, I guess, Michael, well, let's go to you first and let you give like an elevator pitch, if you will, of the film and tell us a little bit about how it kind of came into being.
Absolutely. Thank you, Pops, for the opportunity to be here. This is a real pleasure. So yeah, Peter 58 is a modern film that's rendered with a 1940s film noir brush. So that's the inspiration for the film. It's contemporary, but the style that it's presented in and the style that it's rendered in is calling back to the pulp melodramas of the 1940s. This is one of my favorite genres, my favorite spaces in film. And I have a whole wayward youth spent devouring pulp novels and their film adaptations. I was very much a library kid. I read all the Raymond Chandlers. I read all the Dashiell Hammetts, Mickey Spillane, James M. Cain. He runs the gamut. The hard-boiled pulp authors were something I was very passionate about. I actually read the books before I even saw the films. And then when I started to watch the film adaptations, I was very, very passionate about them and very opinionated about them. And still to this day, that's when I watch a film for pleasure, it's probably going to be a pulp film from the 40s. They have a certain quality about them. They have a certain tempo and a certain lyrical aesthetic that I really respond to, and I think it's lacking with modern films. We don't really get films that have that quality. So Peter 58 is inspired by these films, and and it has Easter eggs and references to many films from the 1940s. So that's hopefully gives you a little context on what to expect with the film.
Jet, what was it about the mystery man coming to town, neo-noir thing that kind of clicked for you?
The mystery man. I like how you described that.
I mean, that's kind of the essence of Kevin Spacey's character, right? The kind of the mystery man
Totally.
kind of shows up in town, and we're kind of
Totally.
yeah.
He plays a charismatic sort of it's sort of the detective role but in verse, and that was so great about Michael's script. And when I got to read it and I mean play this part, it was incredible. It's a lifelong dream. I grew up watching Betty Davis and all the old 1940s 50s movies, and I'm Katharine Hepburn, Vivian Leigh, Joan Crawford, all the greats, right? And the big drama they brought to the screen, and also the femme fatale characters, and how mysterious and dangerous and beautiful these women were, like Lauren Bacall and of course Bogey. And um, getting to read this script, it was brilliant because it's sort of inversed. My character who would normally play or be the femme fatale, which is the gorgeous but dubious, mysterious woman who brings sort of certain death or close to it to the protagonist, the detective in the movie. And it's sort of inversed in this, where Kevin Spacey playing the role of Peter is the charismatic hitman / detective role, and he comes in looking for my character, who's the sort of femme fatale protagonist. So and he's this agent of confront for my character, who's hiding a big secret from her past, and has gotten away to this idyllic alpine town. And she changes her name and changes her job description, and she's sort of hiding in plain sight with all these little town people and in this town.
Then the wolf shows up, and all heck's gonna break loose. That's what we know. So You got a great casting director for this. Obviously, John Jackson's got a long resume of
Yeah.
stuff. Michael,
Absolutely.
how much credit does he get for landing this? I mean, amazing cast, folks. Kevin Spacey, obviously Rebecca De Mornay, and Jake Weber, which I have not. I actually just saw Jake. I did a review during Halloween of Dawn of the Dead. I did a rewatch of that
Oh,
Snyder
sure.
film, but obviously he
yum.
played a villain in Hell on Wheels. He'd done some Homeland work and the Medium, of course, things like this. So you ended up with just a really an all-star cast for such a smaller budget project. How much of that gets to be John's doing, or how much was it just kind of like the universe just aligned, the script got on Kevin's desk and he said, let's just put some weight behind this?
Yeah, well, we love working with John Jackson. So for those who don't know, John was Alexander Payne's casting director, and he worked with Alexander on About Schmidt and Sideways and many great films. So we give a lot of credit to John Jackson for building out this ensemble. He's fantastic. Now, with regards to Kevin, his involvement really came down to resonating with the material. We did have this script, as we've mentioned, that's calling back to the 1940s. And Kevin, to my surprise, is a real film buff. He's aware of his place in film history. He's very self-aware. And before his filmography began, he was a ravenous cinephile, and he was watching all these old movies. So right away we resonated on the source material, and there was some talks with Kevin leading up to his involvement. Before he really committed to it. And everyone wanted to make sure we had alignment. We were on the same page, and we understood what we were doing here, and the intention of making this pulp melodrama with a period score and performances that are in a certain key to work with that period score. And so all of the tonal ingredients had to work together, and so there was a series of talks with Kevin leading up to this to make sure that everybody is comfortable embarking on this, and everybody understood the intent. And one example would be Kevin asking, if I had to choose a character from film history that would inform his character, who would that be? And there's more than one. So let's put it that way. I mean, obviously Robert Mitchum plays these what I call the pest archetype very well in Night of the Hunter and the original Cape Fear and other great films where he's this presence that you can't really shake. You can't really get rid of him. So this was one of the reference points. And Orson Welles was another great reference point. Orson Welles in The Third Man, Orson Welles in Touch of Evil, in particular The Third Man, as this lyrical villain, a villain that has this levity to him and a humor to him as well. And so we discussed all of these reference points with Kevin, and everyone needed to make sure that we were on the same page and this was going to work. And I think we all felt we felt that creative alignment and went for it. So there was many discussions with Kevin leading up to this before he signed on. But to your point, John Jackson played a big role in all of these names coming on board.
Jet, let me ask you about Sam. What is it that you pulled from or pulled together or were inspired to kind of flush Sam out to kind of make her come to life in this film?
Yes. I always draw inspiration from Vivien Leigh because she had those fiery eyes and just very, very fiery, gorgeous woman. But Michael actually introduced me to a film actress from the 40s I had no idea about prior to making Peter, and that's Jean Tierney. And I sort of equate her to the American version of Vivien Leigh because she looks and has that same drama just like her. And particularly, Michael showed me Leave Her to Heaven with starring Jean Tierney. And it's such a gorgeous movie. It's a total Technicolor noir or thriller, I would say. And she plays the protagonist and is the femme fatale at the same time, and just those fiery eyes and the red lips, and we actually duplicated that a lot in the movie, especially in the one of the final dramatic acts in the movie. I have a sort of costume and look and the scenery, the scene in which the final dramatic scene takes place is very very stylistically similar to Leave Her to Heaven. So if anybody would like to check out that movie, I think it's one of Scorsese's favorite movies as well. To sort of get some references to Peter, that's exactly what we were gunning for, what we were going for, and I just love her as an actress.
Michael, how would you advise people to pull a team together for something like this? Because let's be honest, neo noir and 1940s film noir references, and I have a hard enough time trying to get folks to watch black and white movies sometimes. You're trying to pull a team together to create this type of vision, that kind of thing. What are some of the advice you'd have for people to kind of communicate some of the strengths of that era and that genre, and also how to communicate to build the team together for that vision?
Well, Pops, I have the same problem getting people to watch black and white films. It's a hard sell,
I think you and
That's
I,
why
you
it's
and I need
not.
you and I need to just exchange emails and have you come back on. We'll just do a whole show just on some of those films, just
I
so
would love it.
just to give a 10 recommendations or something. Because I think that's kind of it's missing.
Let's make it happen. I mean, just to cover some. Jet mentioned Leave Her to Heaven, which is fantastic, and we call that an alpine noir, because film noir isn't necessarily long, dark hallways and Venetian blinds and high contrast shadows. Film noir can also be in Technicolor, and it can have an aesthetic which juxtaposes the themes. It can have this bright, shiny aesthetic, and that was one of the inspirations for this too. So not only was there a challenge to get some education on this period, to your point, but it was a specific niche of the period. So it's intended to be a Technicolor alpine noir that like Leave Her to Heaven. I think a lot of what made this team assemble and get everyone on the same aesthetic page to address your question was Kevin's commitment to it. When Kevin, who's very film literate and again very aware of his place in film history and all of these references, when he really came on board and committed to it, we had a center of gravity that all of these planets could orbit around. And then through John Jackson, we get Rebecca De Mornay, who's another legend and just a fantastic person and a fantastic actress. And when Kevin and Rebecca met, that created this effect, this very positive effect. They had great chemistry on and off screen. They became very close. So and then she clicked into it. She got it. And Jet is fantastic. I mean, she's I think a breakout star waiting to happen in the near future here. And Jet as well is immersed in film history. So as a director, I was very fortunate to have these key players that are very invested in old films, very, very invested. And yeah, it's a challenge. I think most film buffs kind of start, the earliest that they want to go these days is the 70s, and the 70s is fantastic. But if you go back a little further and then a little further still, you're really rewarded for it. I think the 40s is the best decade for film. And we had key talent on this project that shared that view, and so. And that allowed us to have fun with it, to make a creative space where we're not simply emulating the 40s. We're telling a modern tale with modern people and we're having fun with it. We're able to invert some of these archetypes a little bit and play with these tropes. And there's a meta quality to it. So once the team understood the space that we're operating in, that's when the fun begins. That's when you can start playing with inversions and juxtapositions and having some fun, not just a straight emulation. But roundabout way of answering your question, I think a big part of it was the key talent, including Kevin, Rebecca, and Jet, really resonating with the material and setting that tone for the whole crew.
I don't want to ignore the elephant in the room a little bit about the Kevin Spacey scandal, which perpetuated the delay of the film, because obviously a lot of the production had already been done, those kinds of things.
Mhm.
Jet, how was that emotional roller coaster, knowing that the work had been in, but it was kind of like put on the shelf? Maybe there was even phases of uncertainty of, oh man, what's going to happen and when will it happen? Talk a little bit about that emotional roller coaster, because I know there are a lot of folks that are still reeling from the last 5 years, really, because everything's kind of been up and down sideways since 2019. So projects come and go and whatever. Talk a little bit about that journey for you, because it has to have just been tumultuous to be able to know I'm going to get to do this film next to Kevin Spacey and Rebecca De Mornay and Jake Weber, all these great people in this project. And I know Michael's put his heart and passion, and I'm behind. And then this is happening, COVID's out, all this stuff's happening. So talk a little bit about that emotional roller coaster that you've gone through.
Oh, it was a total emotional roller coaster. Absolutely. There was definitely times where we were like, is this movie going to come out? How is it going to be received? But to Kevin's credit, he has faced challenges over the last several years, and he's stood up to them. He's fought back, and he faced his time in the trials, and he's been vindicated. And luckily for us, it's finally now the right time to bring this movie, his comeback movie, to Kevin's American audience.
Okay. The last question on Peter 5'8" I want to get to, Michael,
Mhm.
because it kind of could get a little spoilery. So I wanted people to know, could get a little spoilery with your answer. You decide how much you want to go with it, because I don't want to ruin a film like this, but I think that it can be. Peter 5'8" obviously is a scripture reference. Talk about being sober and vigilant. Your adversary, the devil, walks like a roaring lion, seeking for those they can devour. Talk a little bit about that inspiration and how it connects to this story.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, first off, there's an interesting phenomena, I think, with film as it relates to scripture and to faith, and that's that a film generally gets put into a faith category, or it's mainstream Hollywood, which in my experience is disrespectful to a faith audience. So I think there's room for a middle ground, and that's something interesting with Peter as well. I mean, this is a cinephile film. It's not a quote unquote faith film, but it still treats the passage from which it derives its title with respect. That's something I think worth mentioning. I do think there's room for a middle ground between a faith-based film and a film which is very disrespectful to faith. I do think Peter kind of resides in that middle ground, and there's room for that. Now, as to the themes of the film, there, as Jet has mentioned, this is a character that has not confronted her own actions. She's not a responsible person. She's running, and the film is saying you can only run for so long before it catches up with you. And that's the core theme of the film. You eventually have to confront your own actions. And Peter, the Kevin Spacey character, is a dark angel of, if you will, of confront. He forces this confrontation with one's own actions, namely Jet's character. And so there's many references in the film to the passage from which the title is derived. Part of the passage is be sober and be vigilant. Sam, Jet's character, is a raging alcoholic, and she's in a constant state of fleeing from her own actions. It's in a sense, Peter, while he is the villain of the piece, he's also instigating confrontation with her lack of responsibility. So hopefully that gives a little bit of context to the title and as it relates to the film.
Yeah, and I really do appreciate what you said early on too about that. Just being respectful of a scripture or influence of a religion or a faith. And I've talked a lot about that here on the channel, especially now. I've also dove into a lot of Indian cinema over the last couple of years, and a lot of those films are very heavily spiritual and religious, even though we don't culturally totally embrace and understand all of that. It is still fascinating how much of a respect they'll have for trying to at least be honorable to whatever they're trying to communicate. They're not trying to alienate anybody, which I think is part of what I think films can do. It's like, can we just not alienate people? I don't need you to be 100% into one lane. Just how about you don't, let's not, let's just not,
I very much agree. Very much agree.
Okay, Jet, this is not your first time with a big name star or anything like that. I know Ben Affleck gave you some advice and that kind of thing back when you had a little bit part in Argo.
Back when I was a wee little actor,
wee
little acting part in that.
Wee little goes all the way back to, I believe, Wizard of Waverly Place. Did I get that right? The name of that show? Yeah. That was wee little Jet back then.
I had some Disney time. Exactly. Yeah. I got to work with Ben Affleck in Argo. It totally changed my world in thinking, because I got to watch him like 10 feet away when he was behind the camera saying action and then going into the scene. And I just never forget that. And I think, around that time, actors were getting serious about creating their own stories and, being producers or being directors and sort of taking their careers in their own hands. And that's that I love to do that. I'm a creative person, and I want to be a force for entertaining and good movies. I always look back on, and so does Mike, and we ask ourselves, what are the kind of movies I would want to watch? And Thirdly, Peter is one of those movies I would so want to watch. I would super want to watch this movie, and it's sort of a throwback. It has 50s and 40s flair to it, and I'm just such a big fan of that. And it's not trying to to give you a message. I love people getting their own messages from stories. I love that. I don't want to I don't want to give them something that they that they haven't thought of for themselves. I
always use the example at the end of Castaway where it just leaves you. And there were people that stood up around us and they were angry. And I'm thinking that's the best way to end something like this. It's like, you're so thirsty for more. That's so great. I was just loving life right there, because it was just so crazy.
And that's cinema discussion. That's the discussion of cinema. That's what makes it good. It's not when it's this fixed idea that everyone knows they're supposed to receive at the end of the movie. That's the joy of cinema. It makes it great to discuss, and everyone has their own interpretations.
Well, that's interesting on that topic. You mentioned the end of Castaway, and I was fortunate enough to work for Zemeckis for some years. So I know Robert Zemeckis and his work, and that is a great ending, and it's ambiguous, but it's in a film which has very, very clear old-fashioned storytelling before that ambiguity at the end. And I think Peter has some of that as well. I think
yes.
There's a lot of modern storytelling that to me is a bit muddled, if you will, and you have actors that mumble lines, and you have storylines that are confusing and hard to follow. And that's one of the pleasures of these films from the 40s, is it's very clear and very intentional storytelling. But at the same time, you can tell a clear and intentional story with an old-fashioned brush, but you can leave the audience with something to talk about at dinner afterwards, something to talk about in the aisles heading out. And Peter definitely does that. So we've had some discussions with those who've seen the film about this very thing. So I think there's room for both, for that ambiguity that leaves you kind of chewing on the film while still embracing that really clear, intentional storytelling.
Well, I just like the fact that we're actually talking about actually having story arcs, because I have to be honest, as a critic, sometimes I watch things, I'm like, I'm not even sure what this character is arc. I don't even know why we did this. Like there is some frustration sometimes where I watch certain things, but let me throw back at you too, Michael, because obviously when you have a multi-Oscar winner, a man that is part of at least, 4 all-time great films. I don't know how we would just kind of dodge around 4 or 5 of these films that he's been a part of.
Mm-hmm.
How does it work on set to, have him speak to a scene, or have him speak to "Could we try?" or how did any of that play out? If you could speak to any of that, I don't want to throw anybody under a bus or anything like that, but I do enjoy. I think people do enjoy too some of that creative process. Like there's this one moment where he kind of said, "Let's try this," and it turned out to be like lightning in a bottle. Those kinds of moments.
Absolutely. Well, Kevin is the intersection of two things. My experience with the man on set is, I would say, comes down to very intense professionalism and very outrageous humor. That's Kevin Spacey to me. He comes prepared. He takes it very seriously. He's thinking about the scene he's going to film in the morning, the previous night, but he's also an outrageous comedian. When he walks into a room, he's looking for the humor in that room, and I love the intersection of those two things. Or I should say the collision of those two things, of professionalism with comedy. So when Kevin arrives on set in the morning, he's prepared. He's thought about the scene. He's made notes in the script. But he's also making the crew laugh, and he's always thinking about ways to find humor in the scene. And the film is funny. It's funny in a subtle way. It's not necessarily a slapstick comedy, but there's humor to be had. And in almost every scene, we were trying to find the humor, even if it's humor that you might not notice on the first viewing. On the first viewing, you might just think you're watching a thriller, a pot boiler. But the more you watch it, the more you hopefully will discover that humor. So that's Kevin. Now, as to how his preparation goes and how that looks on set, there's times that we'll film the scene verbatim as scripted. There's times that Kevin and I will sit down in the morning. He'll show me notes from the previous night that he took, and he wants to discuss the scene and possibly modify it a little bit. And then there's times where Kevin will have a little surprise up his sleeve, and he'll reveal that surprise as the cameras are running, and that's fantastic. And that
next thing you know, you're looking at Kaiser Soze. I got it. I understand. It's okay. Yeah, that's fun.
Absolutely.
That's fun.
Yeah,
that's
and
awesome.
I think Jet can probably speak to at least one of those surprises where Kevin would.
That's where I was going. So Jet, is there a bizarre moment where you're like, oh my gosh, he just so got me? I can't believe this is happening. At least it's being caught on film for posterity's sakes.
Definitely the scene between there's one spicy scene between him and Rebecca that had all of us in stitches every single time they shot that, and both of them just started riffing and getting more and more creative with it, and then a tennis racket came out at one point and we were just all, we had to really force back just lots of laughter coming, or bursts coming out of us while we were shooting. And for me, I think, well, because I had more intense dramatic scenes with Kevin. There was one in particular, and it's the kitchen scene, and I think he inserted a line in there that, or no, he changed it up. He changed the meaning of it, and it became darker, and it really was chilling, and it was so perfect. Kevin comes from the theater. He's won all sorts of awards on Broadway and in London at the Old Vic, and working on the stage, and particular for stage actors, they're so great. His performance is so pure. He's always looking for what can make this scene more intense, more invigorating, more just in any capacity. And that's exactly what he was doing all the time. And if he wasn't cracking us up, like, in front of the camera, he was, playing Orson Welles or doing Bobby Darin impersonations for us, and just cracking us up.
Awesome. Michael, I want to just kind of we'll change topics a little bit here and kind of go back to your roots a little bit, because obviously someone that comes from visual effects, you've done a long resume of stuff. Obviously, we talked briefly about Pixar and stuff like that, but you worked on Transformers film and Prometheus and stuff like that. So what has it been like to transition from visual effects into a man who's writing and getting behind the camera?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's interesting. I prior to entering the world of visual effects, as a boy, I was a rabid film buff, and I was writing scripts from about the age of 15 on. I actually tried to make my first film as a teenager, and failed to get it off the ground. And it was a great learning experience. During this period of my early teens, I had a mentor. I was living in Colorado at the time, and I had an older mentor who took me under his wing, a man named Bruno Basio, who ran a film program at the local public library. And he turns out, as I got to know him, it was revealed to me that he was Federico Fellini's driver in the 60s. And so he was Fellini's personal driver, and he would drive him to the set of 8½, and he had this whole storied former life in Rome with Fellini. And Bruno really exposed me to Italian cinema and to the films that we're talking about today, 1940s film noirs. And he would screen 35 millimeter prints of these films at the library. So he was a great influence on me. So this was kind of my world before entering visual effects. Now, in conjunction, I had taught myself computer graphics. I actually got time on a very early computer graphics system called a video toaster at a public access TV station, and I got access to this machine by volunteering time as a cameraman on public access TV shows. So I would play the cameraman on these shows. I would get credits, and then I would use these time credits on this very early computer graphics machine. So I learned this trade in conjunction with immersing myself in film and visual effects. And when my first attempt at making a film did not come to fruition, and it was a great learning lesson about the fragility of production. I mean, a production can just vanish into the ether like that. I mean, anything that can go wrong can threaten a film coming to life. So that was a great learning experience. It's very hard to build a production, to hold it together, and to see it through to fruition. So after this early attempt at making a film fell apart, I elected to enter the visual effects world as a way to hopefully get close to directors I admired, and to watch them work, and to see these big productions behind the scenes. And my first film that I was a part of was Grindhouse, which was the Tarantino Robert Rodriguez double feature. And I was responsible for a lot of the gore effects in Planet Terror. And funny enough, that was Quentin shoots film, and Robert shoots digital, and he was shooting this film digitally with an early camera system that had a very film-like response. And I was fascinated getting these what we call plates back. This is the raw footage from set, and I would look at these plates from Robert's film, and it looked very film-like to me. And I was quite impressed with this. So this became kind of a source of fascination with me, and I ended up acquiring that camera system. And the first two small features that I shot, first one was incredibly micro budget, experimental with non professional actors or first time actors, but shot a full feature with this system almost as a test to see if the aesthetic was as high as I remember it from Planet Terror, and to just bring something to completion. And then a second feature, Hotel Dunsmuir, where I first worked with Jet Jandreau, was shot with the same camera system. So this is kind of a long-winded way, Pops, of hopefully illustrating that there was these parallel tracks going. You know, there was working on these productions, but they were fueling and informing my forays into writing and directing. And so these tracks would go in parallel. But I've been very fortunate on the visual effects side to work with some directors I really admire. I got to spend a year in London working with Ridley Scott on Prometheus. We mentioned Robert Zemeckis. Helped Robert build out a studio in a converted aircraft hangar for his virtual production of a Christmas Carol, and many years spent at Pixar and other facilities. So I kind of go between these parallel tracks of very big movies and very tiny movies, and I think there's room for both, and I think they can inform each other.
Jet, let's see if we can find this video toaster. What do you think? Anything look familiar that time, Michael?
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, that's pretty close.
That's it. It's not exact, but it's
right.
it's in the family. Yeah, it's an Amiga based system, and this was, by the way, this was used in many early computer graphics on television. Babylon. Remember the show Babylon 5? Well, Babylon 5 was
Amiga 3000
with this system.
Wow. We're going old school right there.
Yeah. Wow. And that's I should say, amongst in the visual effects world, that's a very well-loved system. Anyone who has time on the video toaster just has nothing but fond memories of it.
Video toaster.
Jet, one of the fun things about getting to do what you're doing as a performer is to have like crazy life experiences and training and all that. And of course, the vigilante deals with this almost, first off, the human trafficking topic at least got to be topic of conversation because of Sound of Freedom and other things like that. Yeah. But the fact that you're able to do that, but it gave you a chance to have all this physical training and all this experience. Talk a little bit about what that's like, because that's got to be kind of I don't want to say it's a perk or a fringe benefit of doing what you're doing as a performer, but it's kind of it's kind of a cool thing that you get to do that, maybe otherwise may not have gotten to do.
Oh, yes. A French benefit, you said. Ooh la la. Yeah, well,
I meant fringe, I'm sure, but it probably came out French. So farther the comment section will surely let me know what I actually said.
Oui. Yes. I absolutely love diving into challenging roles. I look for roles that have challenges. So whether it's physicality or like with Sam in Peter, I have a transatlantic accent. I like to switch it up vocally for characters, but in the Vigilante, it was incredible. And first of all, we didn't know Sound of Freedom existed at all. We were shooting this movie right around the same time as they were trying to get it released and had their challenges to go through. And we believed we were the only movie out there telling the story. Actually, the director went on to then help with stunts on Sound of Freedom after our movie. But no, it's an incredible story, and I got to train stunt and weapon training and military training, and I play a Marine spec op who loses her sister to a sex trafficking ring in the U.S. And it's all too common, as we know, and it's a powerful story that needs to be told. And I absolutely I loved making that movie. I love physical roles. I love action. And I also like drama. I love high drama. I love the melodrama of Peter 5'8" and the 40s movies. So I run a huge gambit. I like
Sure.
I like good stories and good parts and good character parts. And you find as an actor what's meaty or what you can make challenging in that. But yeah, oh, I love that. I mean, you know, Tom Cruise it up for me, you know.
And if I can add one point to what Jet just said,
Sure.
when people see Peter 5'8" and they see her character of Sam, this is a deceptively complex performance. As Jet mentioned, she's taking on a transatlantic accent and she's acting in the melodramatic style of films of this period, which is very different than a naturalistic performance. Naturalism has taken over films, and this started after Bonnie and Clyde, and now it's the de facto way that one is supposed to make a movie. You're supposed to make it relatable, believable, and natural. Peter 5'8" is contrary to that. This is not intended to be naturalism. The films of the 40s are largely not naturalistic. That came with New Hollywood, and that came later. So it's quite remarkable where Jet can to me at least, who is not an actor, and it's an alchemy to me when I watch it happen, that she can move between naturalism. The film we made previously, a very small film called Hotel Dunsmuir, very different type of character, very different type of performance. Her film that you just mentioned, The Vigilante, similar naturalistic performance, and then she can enter a 1940s pulp melodrama world and perform in that style and perform at that pitch. And I think it's quite impressive. And I don't know too many young actresses that can do that anymore, you know. So it's have to give Jet full credit for that.
Yeah, sounds great. Folks, it is Peter 5'8" doing theaters on March 22nd. We'll try to get as many links and information in the description for you to kind of make sure you can connect, but you guys know how to get your own tickets and things like that. It has been a great time to get to know Michael and Jet, talk about a film, their journey. This is just a fun part of what we should do more of, is talk about not only just the mainstream films or some of the bigger budget stuff, but try to put shine a light, if you will, on some of these other things like that. So can't thank you both enough for your time. We appreciate you being here. It's been great.
Thank you, Pops.
you.
It's been a real pleasure.
Absolutely.